The silk dress I'd bought for tonight hung on my bedroom door like a ghost of better intentions. White, elegant, expensive, the kind of dress a woman buys when she still believes her family sees her as more than a walking ATM. I touched the fabric, remembering the saleswoman's smile when I said it was for a special dinner with my children. My fingers trembled as I reached for my phone, scrolling through the bank alert that had woken me at dawn. Transaction approved. $38,000. The numbers blurred as I read them again. Each digit a small knife twisting in my chest. At 62, I'd thought I'd learned to recognize the warning signs of people who saw me as nothing more than a resource. But Christopher was my son, my firstborn, the baby I'd nursed through midnight fevers and teenage heartbreak. How could I have been so blind? The perfect setup. The memory of last night's dinner played in my head like a cruel movie. Christopher, 34 and still wearing that boyish smile that used to melt my heart, had arrived with Kathleen clinging to his arm like expensive jewelry. They'd chosen the restaurant, some trendy place in downtown where a glass of wine cost what I used to spend on groceries for a week when I was raising them alone. "Mom, you look wonderful," Christopher had said, kissing my cheek with practiced affection. Kathleen had offered her usual air kisses, her perfectly manicured nails catching the light as she adjusted her designer purse. We'd made small talk about weather, about Kathleen's yoga classes, about Christopher's promotion at the marketing firm where he worked. I'd listened, smiled, asked the right questions. I'd been the perfect mother, the accommodating widow who knew her place in their busy lives. Then came the moment I should have seen coming. "Mom," Christopher had said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand, "Kathleen and I have been talking about taking a trip. We need to reconnect after everything that's been stressful at work." I'd nodded, thinking they wanted my blessing or perhaps advice about destinations. Richard and I had traveled extensively before the cancer took him 5 years ago. Europe, Asia, the Caribbean. After his death, I'd stopped traveling, couldn't bear those airplane seats and hotel rooms without him beside me. "We were thinking the Maldives," Kathleen had added, her voice taking on that breathless quality she used when she wanted something. "There's this amazing overwater resort. 5 stars, private butler, unlimited everything." "That sounds lovely," I'd said, genuinely happy they were prioritizing their marriage. Christopher had exchanged a look with his wife, one of those married couple communications that happens without words. "The thing is, Mom, it's pretty expensive. First-class flights, the villa for 10 days. He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air like expensive perfume. I should have said no then. Should have recognized the setup, the way they'd buttered me up with compliments before moving in for the kill. But I was lonely. And when your son says he needs something, 27 years of motherhood doesn't just switch off. "How much are we talking about?" I'd asked. "Well, with everything included, probably around 40,000, Christopher had said as casually as if he were discussing the weather. "I know it's a lot, but Mom, you've always said experiences are more important than money sitting in the bank." Had I said that? I couldn't remember, but it sounded like something I might have said during one of my weaker moments when loneliness made me philosophical about legacy and love. Kathleen had leaned forward then, her eyes bright with manufactured sincerity. "Virginia, you've been so generous over the years, the down payment on our house, the car when Christopher's broke down, helping us through that rough patch when he was between jobs. You're like the mother I never had. The mother she never had." The words had wrapped around my heart like a warm blanket, making me forget the financial reality. I'd already given them so much over the past 3 years. Nearly $60,000 in loans that had never been repaid, in emergencies that seemed to happen with suspicious regularity. "I'll think about it," I'd said, which in the language of mothers everywhere meant yes. Christopher had grinned, that same smile he'd used as a toddler when he wanted an extra cookie. "Thanks, Mom. I'll send you the details so you can book everything. Your credit is better than ours anyway." They'd left me with the check, of course. $300 for dinner I'd barely touched while they planned their luxury vacation on my dime. The awakening. Now, standing in my kitchen with the bank alert glowing accusingly on my phone screen, I knew I'd been played again. But this time felt different. This time, the betrayal cut deeper than money. I walked to my laptop and logged into my bank account, my fingers moving with purpose I hadn't felt in years. The transaction history told the story clearly. $38,000 transferred to Christopher's account at 11:47 p.m. He hadn't even waited until morning. Hadn't called to thank me or confirm the details. He'd simply taken what he'd assumed was his. But here's what Christopher didn't know about his mother. I might have been lonely and generous to a fault, but I wasn't stupid. I'd built a successful consulting business from nothing after his father died. I'd negotiated million-dollar contracts with people who thought I was just a grieving widow they could manipulate. I opened a new browser tab and logged into my credit card accounts. One by one, I reported the cards as lost. New cards would arrive in 7 to 10 business days, but the current ones, the ones Christopher had used for this transaction, would be frozen within the hour. Next, I called the airline directly. The Maldives flights were booked for tomorrow morning. First-class seats that cost more than some people's cars. The customer service representative was polite but firm. The tickets were non-refundable, but they could be cancelled for a partial credit. I'd like to cancel the reservation, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. May I ask the reason for the cancellation? I paused, looking out at the morning sky. Fraud, I said simply. The resort was next. When I mentioned that the reservation had been made without authorization using stolen credit card information, their tone changed quickly. They agreed to cancel the reservation and issue a full refund. As I worked through each piece of their elaborate vacation, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: power. Not the cruel kind that seeks to hurt others, but the quiet strength that comes from refusing to be victimized. My phone buzzed with a text from Christopher. Thanks again for everything, Mom. We'll send pictures from paradise. I stared at the message for a long moment, then set the phone aside without responding. Let him enjoy his gratitude while it lasted. Legal consequences. The next call I made was to my lawyer, Margaret Lewis, who'd handled Richard's estate and various business transactions over the years. She listened without judgment as I explained the situation. Virginia, she said gently, I need to ask, did you give explicit permission for this transaction? I said I'd think about it. I never authorized him to take the money. Then we have grounds for a formal complaint. Are you sure you want to pursue this? It's your son we're talking about. I looked at the white dress hanging on my door, remembering how hopeful I'd felt buying it. How foolish I'd been to believe this dinner was about spending time together rather than extracting money from me. He's counting on that, I said. He's counting on me being too embarrassed or too loving to hold him accountable. But Margaret, I'm 62 years old and I'm tired of being treated like a bank that never asks for collateral. I'll file the paperwork today, she said. Fair warning, this will likely get ugly before it gets better. It's already ugly, I replied. They just think I'm too polite to notice. The confrontation. The sound of pounding on my front door at 7 in the morning would have terrified me a week ago. Today, it felt like music. I took my time walking from the kitchen where I'd been enjoying my first peaceful cup of coffee in months. Through the peephole, I could see Christopher's face contorted with panic and rage. Kathleen stood behind him, still in yesterday's clothes, mascara smeared beneath her eyes like war paint. They looked exactly like what they were, two people who had just discovered their free ride had been cancelled. I opened the door but kept the chain lock engaged, creating just enough space to see them clearly while maintaining my boundary. Mom, what the hell did you do? Christopher's voice cracked with indignation. Good morning to you too, sweetheart, I kept my voice level, almost cheerful. You're up early for someone who should be on a plane to the Maldives right about now. Kathleen pushed forward, her usual polished facade completely gone. Virginia, please, you have to fix this. The airline says our tickets were cancelled. The resort says there's no reservation, and Christopher's credit card was declined when we tried to book a new flight. That's terrible, I said with the same tone I might use to discuss disappointing weather. Did you try calling your bank? Christopher's face flushed red. Don't play dumb, Mom. We know you did something. The bank showed the transfer going through last night, and now suddenly everything's frozen. I studied my son's face, looking for any sign of remorse, any acknowledgement that perhaps taking $38,000 without explicit permission might have been wrong. Instead, I saw only entitlement and fury that his plans had been disrupted. The transfer went through, I confirmed, and then I reported it as fraud, because that's what it was, Christopher. Fraud. The word hung in the air between us like a slap. Fraud. Christopher's voice climbed higher. Mom, you said we could go on the trip. I said I'd think about it. Thinking about something and authorizing you to steal from my bank account are two very different things. We didn't steal. You took $38,000 from my account without my explicit permission. In most states, including this one, that's called theft. And since it was over $2,500, it's a felony. I watched Christopher's face go white as the implications sank in. Kathleen looked like she might vomit on my front porch. You wouldn't, Christopher whispered. You wouldn't actually press charges against your own son. The old Virginia would have melted at the pain in his voice. Would have opened the door, pulled him into a hug, and figured out how to make this right for everyone. But the old Virginia had been buried along with $60,000 in her loans, and years of being treated like a convenience rather than a person. I already did, I said simply. Margaret filed the papers yesterday afternoon. You'll both be served within the next few days. Kathleen started crying then, big, heaving sobs that might have been genuine if I hadn't seen her turn them on and off like a faucet whenever she needed something. Virginia, please. This will ruin us. Christopher could lose his job if he's charged with a felony. We have a mortgage, car payments. You should have thought of that before you planned a luxury vacation with stolen money. The reckoning. 3 months later, I sat in the courthouse lobby with Margaret, waiting for the hearing. Through the tall windows, I could see Christopher and Kathleen approaching with their lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit who looked like she specialized in making victims feel small. The hearing was smaller than I'd expected. Judge Martinez, a woman about my age with kind but sharp eyes, reviewed the case file while we all took our seats. Christopher looked terrible. He'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes. For a moment, my heart clenched with the old maternal instinct to comfort him. Then I remembered the $38,000, the casual dismissal of my feelings, the assumption that my money was his to take. This case, Judge Martinez began, involves a family financial dispute that has escalated to criminal charges. The defendants claim the transaction was authorized verbally. The plaintiff maintains it was theft. She looked directly at Christopher and Kathleen. The evidence shows a clear pattern. Mr. Thompson accessed his mother's account without explicit authorization, regardless of any verbal discussions about thinking about it. The amount, $38,000, constitutes grand theft in this state. My heart hammered as she continued. However, given the family relationship and the fact that this appears to be a first offense, I'm offering a plea agreement. Both defendants will plead guilty to theft in the third degree, perform 150 hours of community service each, and pay full restitution plus court costs. You'll also attend financial counseling sessions focused on boundaries and family relationships. Community service. Kathleen's voice cracked. Your Honor, I have a job. Mrs. Thompson, your employment status doesn't exempt you from consequences for your actions. Community service can be arranged around your work schedule. You'll be working with elderly patients at Sunset Manor Nursing Home, cleaning, organizing, whatever's needed. Perhaps spending time with people who've been abandoned by their families will provide some perspective. I watched Kathleen's face crumble as the reality hit her. 150 hours of actual work, cleaning up after people society had discarded. It was more fitting than anything I could have imagined. The unexpected gift. 6 months later, I was in my garden when the doorbell rang. A teenage girl stood on my porch, maybe 16, with Christopher's dark eyes and my own stubborn chin. She was thin, wearing clothes that had seen better days, and she looked nervous. Grandma Virginia. Her voice was small, uncertain. I'm Pamela, Christopher's daughter from his first marriage. I stared at her, my mind reeling. Christopher had been married briefly in his early 20s before Kathleen. There had been a baby, but he'd lost contact when his ex-wife moved to Oregon. I'd sent birthday cards to an address that eventually started returning them as undeliverable. Pamela, I breathed. Oh my God, you're so grown up. Dad doesn't know I'm here, she said quickly. Mom gave me your address before she died. She said you used to send cards, and I thought maybe you'd want to know me. For the next hour, we sat in my kitchen drinking tea while Pamela told me her story. Her mother had died the previous year from cancer. Her stepfather was kind but getting remarried, and his new wife didn't want her around. She was in foster care now, working part-time jobs to save for college. Grandma Virginia, she said as we cooked dinner together, can I ask you something? Anything. Would it be okay if I visited sometimes? I know Dad probably wouldn't like it, but I don't really care what he thinks anymore. I reached across the table and took her hand. Pamela, you can visit whenever you want. In fact, if you need a place to stay while you finish high school, you're welcome here. Her eyes filled with tears. You do that. Even after what Dad did to you. You're not responsible for your father's choices. And frankly, you seem to be the only member of this family who actually turned out well. The real family. A year later, Pamela was living with me permanently. The foster care system had been relieved to place her with family, and I'd been thrilled to have a young person in the house who saw me as a person rather than a resource. She was painting at the kitchen table when the doorbell rang one Saturday morning. Through the peephole, I saw Christopher standing on my porch, alone this time, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. Mom, we need to talk. About what? About Pamela. I know she's been staying here, and I think. No. The word came out sharper than I'd intended, but I didn't soften it. No, Christopher. You gave up any say in Pamela's life when you abandoned her 16 years ago. You don't get to suddenly become a concerned father now that it's convenient. She's my daughter. Biologically, yes. In every way that matters, no. You've never paid a dime of support, never sent a birthday card, never even asked about her until now. What exactly do you think gives you the right to an opinion about her life? I want to make things right. With her or with me? Christopher looked down at his feet. Both, I guess. It's too late for us, Christopher. You made that choice when you decided my bank account was your emergency fund. But Pamela, she's 17 years old with 1 year of high school left. She's an honors student who's never been in trouble, never asked anyone for anything she didn't earn. She's staying with me because she chooses to, not because I'm bribing her with money. I started to close the door, then paused. Christopher, if you want a relationship with Pamela, that's between you and her. But understand this, she's seen what real love looks like now. She knows the difference between someone who cares about her and someone who sees her as useful. If you want her in your life, you'll have to earn it. And given your track record, that's going to take a very long time. I closed the door and walked back to the kitchen where Pamela was still painting. "Was that Dad?" she asked, looking up. "Yes." "What did he want?" "To explain himself. To make things right." Pamela nodded thoughtfully. "Do you think he means it this time?" "I think he means it right now. Whether he'll still mean it when it requires actual work and sacrifice is another question entirely." She smiled and went back to her painting. "Well, I'm not going anywhere. This is the first place that's ever felt like home." I looked at the girl who'd shown up on my doorstep scared and abandoned, now thriving in the afternoon light, planning for college, talking about her dreams. She'd given me something my own children never had, a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine affection. "Good," I said, meaning it completely, because I'm not going anywhere either. Epilogue. That evening, I sat in my garden watching Pamela through the kitchen window as she did her homework. At 62, I'd finally learned the difference between love and convenience, between family and biology, between forgiveness and enabling. I'd lost 2 children but gained something infinitely more valuable, my self-respect and a granddaughter who saw me as a person worth knowing. The $38,000 had been the best money I'd ever spent. Not because I got it back, though the restitution payments were coming along nicely, but because it had finally shown me who I really was and who the people around me really were. And for the first time in 5 years, that person was someone I was proud to be.